I'm here at Frankford Arsenal to give you the world's very first hands-on look at Frankford Arsenal's FX-10 10-station reloading press. Gavin Gee here from UltimateReloader.com. I'm here in Columbia, Missouri with Michael Lindsay. Michael, thank you for having me out.
Thanks for being here.
This is an exciting moment because I get to be here basically as the first non-Frankford Arsenal employee to see this press hands-on, to put my hands on it, and to walk through with you how the press came about, what people can expect, and see this press in action. We're even going to load 2 different calibers. We're going to load .223, and we're going to load 9mm. So, Michael, tell me, what was your role in bringing this press into its existence today?
Well, I'm the product engineer with Frankford Arsenal that was responsible for the Progressive Press project, and I've been on this for about 3 years, and wow. I'm really excited to see it finally come to life.
Okay, so I suggest to get things started, we do a quick 223 loading demo. So let's see the machine in action, and then we'll talk about all the details. How about that?
Sounds good.
Literally my first time seeing this work. I see. Using the Frankford Arsenal seeder, dropping a bullet each time.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. All right, well, it's pretty awesome to see all 10 stations in action. Next, we're gonna break down all of the feature details. So here it is, the FX-10, literally #1.
Yes, this is the first one ever made.
And some of the quick facts. The price is gonna be between $1,000 and $1,200. Mm-hmm. It's going to be available in early 2022, and it's got 10 stations. It comes with large and small priming. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It comes with the case feed system. That's a lot of value and function for that price point.
Yeah, we just really wanted to bring that premium level of reloader down to where your average loader could afford it. Mm-hmm. And we feel like we did that with this. It's got a lot of premium features that you don't normally find on presses with this price point.
Yeah, let's walk through some of that.
It's got built-in swaging.
Okay.
It's got dual decapping stations, so you're able to decap in redundant stations so you don't have primer drawback. Mm-hmm. It has a gear-driven primer system. It has a primer alarm that is powered from the tool head, so there's no batteries to mess with. Mm-hmm. It has an integral workspace light.
Love that.
It has a hard powder reset safety, mm-hmm. so there's no way that the powder measure can get stuck in the upright position. Mm-hmm. It will reset when the tool head returns to the top of the stroke.
That fail-safe is super important for safety. No double charges and no squib loads.
Yeah, that's one of the most dangerous things you can do is get a squib, especially in pistol when there's no way to detect that mm-hmm. after the bullet's been seated. It's also got a provision for an internal bullet feeder for pistol built into the tool head. So it will be able to feed and seat bullets in the same station. Mm-hmm. And you've got enough open stations to have powder check, bullet feed, bullet seat, and crimp all running simultaneously.
Which is really what you want. And if you want to think of this as a production environment, even if it's in your garage, having the ability to manipulate each of those separate variables in the reloading process, whether it be the swaging pressure or the primer seating depth or bullet seat, bullet crimp, that's just going to make your life a lot easier.
Definitely.
Yeah. What I think is kind of unique and curious are these buttons that hold the shells in place. You basically push down on the button and then put the case in. Did you hear that? It clicks. And that's just a really quick way to get the cases in and out of each station, except the priming station, right? You got to advance it beyond that to get that out of there because of the way that the gear-driven mechanism works.
Yeah, there's actually not enough clearance in that station to run one of these buttons. Mm-hmm. But you can, if you want to remove it without advancing the shell plate, you can remove these 2 screws and this limiter will come out and you can slide it out in that station, or you can advance the shell plate and then you can back it up after that.
Can you hand me the shell plate? This is actually really, look at that. It almost looks like something out of a sci-fi movie. You see there's a roller bearing here. The entire shell plate rotates on that roller bearing, and then there's these indexing buttons here that help things get perfectly aligned. Mm-hmm.
And that'll all be sold as an assembly, so you won't have to disassemble that and change plates. When you buy a different caliber plate, that'll all come as one assembly.
Really, really nice surface finish on that as well. This is really cool. So we're going to go a little bit more in depth on the internals of the machine and the mechanisms when we do the caliber changeover, which will be to 9mm. But before that, let's take a detailed look at the loading process from start to finish for 223. So why don't we break down the stations station by station, following a case through while we're running the stations up.
Sounds good.
Okay.
First station is your traditional case feed. As the ram is lowered, a raw case is inserted into the shell plate.
Yep.
The second station we have set up as universal decap. So once the primer is punched, it'll fall through this passageway and out this clear tube.
Okay.
And this clear tube can either be run through the surface of your tabletop, or it can be run out the front if you don't want to drill a hole there, or if you have some kind of an obstruction that prevents you from running the tube out.
Yeah.
The second station we're running as resize only, but you can also run another decapper. You can run simultaneous decap and resize. It just gives you a lot of flexibility, and the primer will exit the machine in the same location that it does if you decap in the first station.
Gotcha. So if you have universal decap and then size with decap, gives you that second chance to poke out a primer that might have drawn back in, just barely hold on to that primer pocket.
Yeah, primer drawback is one of the biggest problems with loading on a progressive press. And a lot of people have either come up with a spring-loaded decapping pin system to try to flick that primer out of the case once it separates, or they run an external vacuum line up to try to pull it off of the end of the priming pin.
Interesting.
This just gives you a second chance to hit it with a pin, and it seems to be a lot more reliable, and there's a lot less moving parts.
What I like about this setup is we could set things up like we normally do even with manual processes, which is to full length size or do neck sizing or whatever you're going to do, and then follow that up with an expanding mandrel die so that you get the perfect neck tension that you specify. And it looks like these two stations would be a great place to do that.
Definitely. That's the big benefit of this design with having the dual decapping stations. It just gives you a lot of flexibility in how you set up your dies.
So now station numbering, are we going 1 at case insertion?
Yeah, we're considering that case 1, the case feeder, is the first station.
So 1, 2, 3, let's go on to station number 4.
Station 4 is the swager. So there's a lower tool block inside the machine that's running on an eccentric lobe off of this shaft. And that tool head has a swage pin and a priming pin on it, but they're independently adjustable. So they both move together as a unit.
So if you're not familiar with swaging is the process of removing a crimp, usually from military brass. 223, 308, 9mm, 45 ACP. I've hit it all, and it's a real pain in the neck if you don't get it. So to have this, even if it's a fail-safe, even if you have just one or a few cases in mixed brass, is a great benefit.
Yeah, if you can't do it on the press, you have to sort, and then you have to do a bunch of manual operations to process your brass, whereas this one does it all in a single pass. Typically what we've got here is a pin of some sort that holds down the brass from the inside while the swaging rod is pushed up from the bottom. Is that pretty much what we see here? Yep, and that'll be included with the tool head.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, so then on to priming.
This press has a gear-driven priming system. So it's a rotary disc that's got 4 stations. Every time the shell plate indexes, it turns the priming gear a quarter of a turn. So you're picking up the primer at this position, and then at your what would be 6 o'clock position as you look at it, you can see that you have a properly staged primer that's ready to be inserted into a case. Then,
nice visual check.
Yep, and you can see that it raises it up right there with no case, and then if you do run it with no case, it'll drop it right back down into the wheel and recirculate it. So you don't lose primers, you don't have to reload them, it's not dropping them into a tube, it's just a continuous recirculating system.
So let's talk about a recirculating system you might have seen, the telephone dial. The telephone dial has a whole bunch of holes that go all the way around. It's a reliable system, it works well, it's self-cleaning, but the problem is it doesn't recirculate, for one thing. The primers on one of the popular presses that's now discontinued, they basically drop out if you keep running the stations. And then because they're in such close proximity, you have a safety hazard. If one primer detonates, you get a chain reaction and it can go up the stack, as it were. And with this kind of separation, you avoid the safety problem. And with the recirculation, you don't have the issues with primers falling out and having to be collected and reinserted, that kind of thing. So I think this sounds like a good solution to those problems.
Definitely. Yeah, the primers are all isolated, so there's no risk of a chain reaction. And this whole primer assembly comes off as one unit. So if you want to switch from small to large primers, you don't even have to unload the tube. You can just set it off to the side. It's got a detent that keeps the gear from spinning. So they'll all stay in there until you're ready to put that size primer assembly back on.
Gotcha. So priming is station number 5, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, on to station number 6. I presume we could expand the case mouth there if we wanted to for pistol?
Yep, if we were running pistol, you could run a case expander there. You might be able to run a trimmer there if you were doing case trim.
Yep. So what, regardless of whether you're doing rifle or pistol, there's something to put there. Right?
Yeah, you can never have too many stations.
That's right.
So station 7 is the powder measure. This press has a hard powder reset so that if the powder measure was to stick in the up position, you notice that as it's down, it doesn't contact. Now there's a case in it. This powder activator will raise the powder measure. So if I hold it up, that nut will crash when it reaches the top of the stroke and forces it to reset. Yeah. So it totally eliminates your risk of having squibs from a stuck powder measure.
Yeah, that kind of fail-safe mechanism is super important, especially once your speeds get up, right? With this kind of a press, with a case feeder, and potentially in the future a bullet feeder, you know, you're gonna be running really fast, and you can't have something that's gonna happen and not get your attention.
Yep.
You know,
when you're running high volume, if you have something like that happen, you could be 200 rounds down the road and not know when it happened. Then you've got, especially if you're loading pistol, the weight discrepancy is not enough to go back and verify which ones have powder.
I have been there. That's a really good point. With the 223, your 24 grains of powder is easily detectable. But with pistols, if you only have 4 grains of powder, your component weight variations can be that much. I've had to break down hundreds of rounds, and it's definitely not fun.
Yeah. So your next station could be powder check. Right now, we're just running a blank die in that station, but
as a hold down?
Yeah, it's as a hold down, so you contact the shell plate in opposite positions of your resizer, just so it doesn't put too big of a load on your bearing.
Seems like that's going to be important for consistent shoulder bump as well, right? There's a very subtle thing there when you're pushing the shoulder back 1.5, 2, or 3 thousandths of an inch. You don't want that to be floating around.
Yep, if you don't have something to prevent tool head rock, it'll affect not only your resizing, but it can affect your primer seating depth, and it can affect your bullet seating. I've seen on other presses the bullet seat depth can change by as much as 30 to 40 thousandths.
Wow.
If you hit, a hard case and the tool head rocks more than you would want it to.
Yeah.
So the next station,
which is 9, is that right?
Yes, this will be station 9. We're almost there. This is bullet seat. We're using the Frankford Arsenal universal bullet seating die, so it retains the bullet and seats it in the same station, so it doesn't have any risk of tipping when it indexes, and it forces it to align so you don't have to expand, which is a really nice feature. And the last station, station 10, will be eject. You can also run a taper crimp die, factory crimp die. You can run a secondary seater if you wanted to make sure that you got it down to the right depth. Just gives you a lot of flexibility having those 10 stations.
Yeah, so for 223 specifically, if we had cannulared bullets, so the cannular is the little crimp groove, we could, for semi-auto feed reliability, for instance, put that crimp on. In the precision context, some guys will like to crimp for the consistency of the neck tension between, the bullet and the case neck. So there's our 10 stations. Next, we're going to go back to full progressive operation. All right, Michael, you mind if I take the helm this time?
She's all yours.
Oh, this is good. This is good. Okay, so I'm going to take a bullet and set it each time. We've already got a bullet in there. Okay. Am I doing this all right? Okay. Got to get into my rhythm. Surprisingly easy on the forces.
Yeah, the linkage geometry was one of the things we spent the most time on this press.
So this is a good demo of running the press down, I suppose. Very good. All right, Michael, here's what I propose. Let's do the tear down. With the machine tore down, let's talk about the internals a little bit, and then we'll build it back up for 9mm. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
So here it is, all taken apart. Now we've taken it further than you're going to need to take it for a traditional caliber changeover, but I love this because we can show people how it works from the inside out.
Definitely, yeah. This has got all the covers off so you can expose all the mechanisms, anything that might need to be adjusted, and you can see how everything works. This is the lower tool block. This contains the priming system and the swaging system, and it's attached to the input drive pin by this connector.
Yep.
And it's attached on an eccentric lobe, so as you lower the handle, that block raises, and it raises the swaging pin and the priming pin simultaneously.
And I can see here that you've got these lock nuts. So I presume you can crack those and then give it a slight adjustment for swaging or priming to control depth.
Yep, they can be adjusted for height. This is how you would replace the pins to switch between large and small. You would just thread them out, and with the shell plate off, they'll both lift out the top.
Yep.
And you would just drop in the corresponding pin for the other size that you wanted to switch to, and then lock it down with the lock nut.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's the right-hand side. And then let's talk about the ram itself. What is that riding in?
The ram is riding in a linear ball bearing, and actually almost every moving part on this press is in a bearing. There's no sliding friction. It's all isolated by bearings.
Gotcha. Okay, and then on the other side?
So on the left side, we have a disc cam that pushes an index armature forwards and backwards, and the index carriage slides on a rail system, and it grabs the shell plate, these indexing nuts on the shell plate, and pulls it to the next position.
So let's talk about the steps that it took to get the press torn down just for the caliber changeover.
Yeah, so the first thing you would do is you would remove the bolt that holds the tool head on, and then the nut that sets the reset stop for the powder measure, and then the tool head lifts off. Also, you got to make sure your electrical connections are disconnected.
Yes.
So it's a USB and a 3.5mm audio jack. Got to disconnect both of those. Then the tool head lifts off. The next thing you got to do is take out your 4 screws that hold your priming assembly on, and your priming assembly will slide off out from under the tool head, or the shell plate rather. And the only trick to that is the ram does have to be in the raised position for that to be able to be removed, or else the priming pin will retain it.
Gotcha, if that makes sense. All right, so that's the first half, the tear down. We got a good inspection of the internals. Why don't we now build it back up for 9mm?
All right.
Why don't we pause for just a second while we've got the press partially put back together to talk about the indexing while we can kind of still see everything. There's kind of a lot going on here.
Yeah, so as you can see, when you advance the shell plate with no priming system in, the shell plate snaps into the next position.
Yep.
That's because this detent ball is spring-loaded, and it engages these notches in the edge of the shell plate to help locate it and ensure that it advances properly. But that snap can cause powder spillage as it indexes. So the way that we have prevented that is on the priming assembly, we have a clutch spring wrapped on the priming gear, which not only prevents the shell plate from rotating backwards as the index mechanism takes another bite on the shell plate, but it also puts just enough drag on the shell plate that the detent ball can properly locate it, but it won't cause that snapping that sloshes powder out.
Gotcha. Okay, now we can continue our reassembly. So we've put the components in place, loaded everything up, and run up all 10 stations. Let's talk about this particular setup, how you're using each station for 9mm.
So we've still got the decapping station on station 2. Then we're running resize and deprime in station 3. We've still got the swage hold down, so we're still swaging even though most 9mm is not crimped.
Yep.
We're priming in station 5. We've got an expander in station 6. We've got the powder measure set for the pistol charge on station 7. And we're running our hold down die on 8. Station 9 is unused. That would be where you would put a bullet feeder if you were inclined to use one, and you could remove your hold down die and put a powder check if you wanted to run that also. So we have room to run all that stuff, but we're just doing a traditional taper crimp die and standard cedar in station 10.
Seat and crimp all in one step in station number 10. Awesome. Well, do you mind if I give it a try?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to take a bullet each time, place it in station number 10, and then hold the handle. And the hardest thing, of course, is getting those bullets aligned in your hand. So it'd be fun to try this with a bullet feeder. Well, there we go. Well, thank you, Michael, for guiding me through this in-depth demonstration of the FX-10. This is super exciting to finally operate the machine myself.
Yeah, we were excited to show it to you. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, and this is nearly what you'll see if you buy one of these machines. It's cast iron construction. It's got the cast iron tool head. Some of the small parts might look a little bit different in the shipping versions, I'm sure.
Yeah, this is the very first one, so there's going to be a lot of little things that we're going to be improving. I'm sure you probably noticed that the case feeder wasn't shutting off automatically. It all functions perfectly. It's just getting the switch tuned. And there's some other little things like that, but functionally, this is exactly what you're going to see in production.
Very cool. And we're going to see that approximately early 2022 for the machine and the case feeder. Is that right?
Yep, Q1 2022 is the current projected release date. And we've also got a lot of accessories coming out for it in the future. Like there's a provision on the tool head for an internal bullet shuttle for pistol bullets. So we're going to have a bullet feeder that's proprietary to this press, and that'll be coming out shortly after the press. And there's also a rifle bullet feeder in the works also.
Very cool. I really like how you thought outside of the box with some of the design details on this press, like these spring detents that hold the cases in each station. It's really cool to see a different take on the progressive reloading press.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, you're going to want to make sure that you're subscribed with notifications, because as these machines become available to the general public, I'll have a final unit. I'll do a full unboxing video. I'll go through some of the additional things that we didn't cover in this video. Thank you for watching. That concludes this video, and that means it's time to wrap it up. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up. Also, make your voice heard. If you have something to say, please drop a comment. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications, because you're not going to want to miss the awesome content that is coming up. And finally, flex your reloading pride. You could look great in one of these t-shirts. We've got multiple designs at the Ultimate Reloader store. I'll see you later, because I'm off to go shooting.